Greetings and very late salutations as Mr. Cross is sat here recording at 1:45 in the morning because when you gotta go, you gotta go. But about 9 hours ago, I recorded and uploaded the Inventor 2024 What's New. I'll link that up here, wherever it appears. And I thought, well, whilst I'm in the mood, let's do the Vault 2024 What's New. So, look, with Vault, history and much experience has taught me that there's very few people on YouTube interested in Vault. It's a niche within a niche within a niche. So I'm going to put minimal effort into this because, let's be honest, very few people are going to click it. There's so few people that are in a position to care about what's new in Vault. Most users just get given Vault. They're kind of forced to use it. They don't really want to. It's just a pain in the arse that gets in the way. So there's so few people that are actually interested in what's going on with it at a technical level. Yeah, it is what it is. So I'm not going to stress myself too much with this one. And on that note, rather than compile my own what's new and demonstrate it, I thought I'll take the easy road out and I'll plug and give my ex-employer the credit for this one. So I'm going to be covering the Symmetry UK's What's New Vault 2024 video. Just up the road from me, Symmetry, biggest reseller in the world now. They weren't when I was with them. We were just small little outfit, just kind of, throwing punches and making waves. But now they're an absolute behemoth in the world of Autodesk, and they've done a great job with this video actually. Jason Kelly, application specialist, has done a 12-minute long video on what's new, whereas the official Vault video for what's new is 2 minutes and 47 seconds long. It's this one here. So he's covered it in far more detail. So let's go over that and what's new. Right, this is what's new. It doesn't look like a lot, but we got to understand Vault team are very small within Autodesk, really small. Even though Vault has, it drives a lot of revenue within Autodesk, the team's really small, and they tend to focus on customer priorities. As a Vault manager myself, I manage a Vault for quite a significant sized organization up the road. There's a few things that I'm kind of hoping for in here, so let's dive through and see what we've got. So that's the list, but within those lists there'll be nuggets of good bits and pieces, which I know what I'm hoping for, but we'll see. So we'll start with copy folder structure. This is something that's been missing for a while. I don't know for sure whether these are going to... Some of them are absolutely guaranteed to only be Vault Professional, things like lifecycle changes, because you don't get those in Vault Basic, but there's no reason, I think, why this couldn't be in Vault Basic, stuff like this, other than it's just an additional upsell to get people off Basic and into Professional, which, in all honesty, any office, this has got nothing to do with what's new, but that's greater than 5 to 10 people, you start to need Vault Professional. It starts to become a necessity and sort of a no-brainer. One-man bands, a couple of people in a very small office, Vault Basic, fine, right? You can get away with that. But when you've got multiple designers working on, you've got processes in place, that kind of thing, Vault Professional it needs to happen. And this is something you've never been able to do, really. I don't think it's something that everybody can immediately start to leverage, but taking a set of folders from an existing either project or area of the Vault and copying just the folders themselves with all the metadata that's associated with the folders, like permissions and folder properties and all that kind of stuff. You can now take that folder subset and recreate it, duplicate it somewhere else in the Vault. So, for example, if your company, when you start a project, if you've got a set number of folders like documents, models, drawings, assemblies, client data, just a whole bunch of folders in like a template format, you can create that as a template of folders and then duplicate it every time you start a new project. That would have been done manually previously, but now you can do that now. Really good job from the Symmetry guys. So they not only explain what the feature is, but then they give you sort of a reason for why it's useful and like a demonstration of it as well. So yeah, reducing time, which that is a thing. Copying folders and making folders in Vault was a very time-consuming thing. Human error is a massive thing in Vault. A lot of human error happens. It can be difficult to spot as well because it gets sort of buried away and there's no alarms or alerts or anything that notifies you. So yeah, you've got this sort of folder structure over here, templates, projects. So this could be your template of folders, like I was saying, drawings, models, parts, customer stuff, and you can just duplicate that to start a new project with. That's really good. Then there's the copy folder on the right-click menu, and it'll take the folder structure. There's the destination, and away it goes and creates a copy of those folders. So lifecycle enhancements. I'm not sure what this is.
These will need to be configured prior to use, but give some added benefit to the automation process.
It's not really so much any enhancements to the way lifecycles operate in terms of state names and progression throughout lifecycles. It's more the secondary documents, as I call them, that are generated on state change. So For anyone wondering, when a file or anything in Vault goes from a lifecycle state to another lifecycle state, like work in progress to review, or review to released, or released to quick change, or whatever, that's called a state change. And after the file has undergone a state change, when it goes from released to work in progress or review to released, upon hitting that second state, you can ask Vault to trigger jobs based on whatever has just happened, whatever state change has just happened. And very recently, I've been around Vault for a long time, within the last few years, they introduced the ability to have a PDF automatically generated upon a state change, which the most typical example of that happening would be when you go from review to released, trigger a PDF generation. It will create a PDF of a drawing, for example. Me personally, just speaking purely from my own experience and what I've done in the past, I've not used Vault's variation of this. We've got a plugin from a third-party supplier from Kadak, a reseller in Holland. They've got their own plugin which generates PDFs. I sourced this long before, several years before the Vault team ever put this in. But even afterwards, now that this is in Vault, their solution is still actually better than what is native to Vault. But it would only do PDFs. So now, even though we've since had this put into this third-party plugin, the Vault natively can generate step files as well as flat pattern DXFs. Why is that useful? Well, depending on where you work, something that goes into Vault will never be applicable to all Vault customers. This is, certain things are only useful to certain companies depending on what they do, what kind of field they operate in. But when you have models that you're getting either made by third parties, suppliers, or that you need to issue out to clients or whatever, you don't send the native files, right? You're not going to send them your Inventor files for multiple reasons. So instead, you typically send them a step file, or not these days in IGES, but usually a step file, so that they can import that into whatever CAD program they use. It's been the case in the past where if you need to send a step file of something that's recently been released to a supplier to get a quote for how much it's going to cost to get it built, or some kind of estimate on time frame for getting something manufactured, you would have to manually generate the step file. Without any third-party add-ins, that would mean downloading all the data from Vault into Inventor and manually making the step file. And then there's no trace on that, right? It's done outside of Vault, so it's just untraceable. But now, when a file goes from review to released, for example, you can have the Vault automatically create a step file for those for all files in the Vault. So you've got a PDF for drawings and a step file for models alongside those files, which sounds great, but there's always issues with this, and I know them all, all of them. Like, for example, that's great for little widgets, little boxes, little small pieces and bits and bobs, but when you've got a gigantic, huge assembly and you put that to release, you don't want a step file being made for that, because the way this works is the job should get offloaded to the job processor. Making a step file of a 10,000 part assembly will bottleneck, if not crash, your job processor PC indefinitely until the job's cancelled and the PC's rebooted. So you need to have and I don't know, I'm just speculating, but there needs to be exceptions for file types and assembly sizes and sort of filters for jobs for this. And there should really also be the ability to offload these jobs to a second job processor, because if you do genuinely have a file that needs to be made into a step file, but it's going to take legit 45 minutes to an hour to make, you don't really want that job to hold up the PDF creation process or the exportation of XMLs or CSV files or whatever it is you send off the ERP program. So offloading those jobs to a second job processor that only does step files and PDFs is something that really needs to be there. Whether that's happened natively in Vault, don't know. Highly doubt it though. But it's good that this is in. It's a good start. I haven't used it yet, but it's good that that's in. But there are some things that I would hope it does. So once it's created those step files and PDF files, it would typically store them inside a Vault alongside the file that's spawned the PDF of this step. But the same way they did with the DWF files a long time ago, it looks like you've got the same ability to sort of automatically, as it would be, push them outside a Vault into a mirrored folder structure outside of the Vault. So if you've got a purchasing team that need to access the PDFs, you could give them a Vault client. The easier option is to just have the PDFs and the step files exported out of Vault to a network share, like a map drive or something on the server that they can look at. So that's a good thing. I like that. That's a nice little addition. What's that one? That's one. Automated tasks run through the job processor. Right. So that's what I'm saying. I would like to hope these can be offloaded to a second job processor or a third or whatever, right? So the jobs don't hog up the main job processor, and hopefully you can tell it to avoid files of a certain size. Derived parts, for example, that are maybe 200, 300 megabytes in size. Don't make a step file of those, please. Right? Do it only for files that are maybe 20 megabytes or less. Peer review. Right. This looks like the 4 eyes change. Let's take a listen.
This can therefore put a step in that will check to ensure that someone else has looked over the file and moved it to the next state change. This can also be configured so that certain custom criteria is met before that state change happens.
Like what?
So if the custom criteria is that the file is a part file and contains a description, it will need to pass the peer review steps.
Okay, that's good.
So let's take a look at an example. If you are using a workflow of work in progress to released, designer A is going to move the part file from released back to work in progress to make the necessary changes for the new release.
Mm-hmm.
With the peer review state check on, and the criteria of the file being met for a part file and the description property, designer A wouldn't be able to move it from work in progress back to released.
Okay, it demonstrates the point. That's not a great example of when you would use that. So what he's saying here is designer A has moved a file from work in progress to released, right? That signs off the part for manufacture. And he's saying the same person then can't move the file from released to work in progress and bump it up a revision. You would normally control that through permission groups and state change criteria. The 4 eyes thing it's designed to stop somebody checking their own work. That's really what it's for. So you've got designer A puts the file from work in progress to review. So the company's got a review stage. Something needs to be checked before it's released. It's just human nature that in an environment with tight deadlines and projects needing to be out the door yesterday, people just want to push the stuff through really quickly. And even people with the rights to release data, they can just go work in progress, review, released, all in one step, or 2 steps really. They've got the permissions to do that, so it'll let them. Not necessarily the case with work in progress to released to work in progress. But yeah, this stops that person from doing that. It enforces the need to have another person move it from review to released, so that person just can't push it through. In a lot of cases, the company might just want that to happen because they maybe trust that person, the deadlines are tight. But if in the event that something really bad happened, that there's a safety issue with that part, with that product or whatever, and somebody was to look back through what went on during the design cycle of that part, it wouldn't look good if just one person put it from work in progress to review and then straight to released, because that person, if they made a mistake, they won't, in most cases, be able to spot their own mistake. It needs another pair of eyes to look over and check it. So that's mostly what the 4 eyes thing's for. Sure, it still will work with whip to review to release to whip, but it's not typically where you would use it. But it would do the job. Admin enhancements, Inventor template. Right. I'm really hoping on this one that you're able to map Inventor, the templates and the design data, the style library, into the vault rather than into a local folder.
However, most companies require this to be a global, stored on a shared.
Yeah, so these are the 3 options you've previously had. So you would have the design data in templates folder in this is the default location, right? You've got it on you see public users, documents, style library, or you would have it on a network share on a map drive, which is how I had it set up for a long time. You've got a T drive or an S drive /Inventor/ templates, and everybody's Inventor project file would map to the map drive where the templates are. That was okay in that everybody's pointing to the same singular templates and style library folder. The downside of that was when the coof happened and everybody dissipated off into the nether working from home, their inventors were looking to the company's map drive from their home location, and if the network ever dropped, then the templates and the styles library stopped working. So it was good for sort of 95% of the time. 5% of the time when things went belly up, it caused problems. Or you can have the templates stored in Vault, which is how I'd started doing it in the last couple of years. So you put your templates and your design data into the Vault. So there's one single source of truth in the Vault, but all users had to manually get the templates in the design data folder into the local workspace. So everybody had their own copy of it locally, but the master copy was in the vault, which means when I change a template or change a style, I have to request that everybody gets a new copy of the templates. It was like a global email out to all users saying, the templates have changed, please download a new copy of it. And you just can't trust people to do that. That's how it was.
Occurred. In previous releases, storing the design data and templates in Vault allowed users to have a central location for the data made to the global template. The user would have to ensure that they performed a get on the file to ensure they have the latest design data. Now have the option to map the design data and templates in the Inventor Vault add-in.
No,
it will
really?
have the option to map the design data and templates in the Inventor Vault add-in. It will also allow you, every time you log into Vault, to download any changes, ensuring that the latest version of the file is always on your machine.
Oh, you beauty. Well done, the Vault team, for that.
So let's take a look at how we've set up design data under the access
So you've got
area.
your map folders drop down. Normally in here, you would put the project would be the dollar, content center files, that maps straight into the Vault. And I'd always wondered about this, like if the content center directory can map into the Vault, pick a folder in Vault, why can't these two had to be local folders?
It would also make sense to add the design data and templates to Vault prior to making the change.
Yeah, okay, obviously.
Once you've selected the mappings, you can then check the project file back into Vault and log out of the Vault add-in for Inventor. You will notice when you log back in, it will do a scan of your mapping location to the folder in Vault and download any files automatically for you to your local workspace.
That's brilliant. That is exactly what I was hoping to hear. This is like, I know I'm sounding a bit hypocritical, this is such a small iterative change, but this makes a huge difference, a massive difference. I'm really happy with that.
Any to update the new considerations to think about when making the change on the Vault IPJ file. So who is able to make
Vault
the changes
security.
to it?
Yeah, I mean, these ones, these things kind of go without saying. Like with the Vault security, you would, even when you've got it the way it is right now, before these changes, you would have folder permissions on the templates in the style library in Vault to stop regular users from being able to change the templates in the design data folder. That kind of good, because you don't want rogue people sort of uploading changes to the templates and the styles. That just causes havoc.
From the data involved, you can put some document control and keep a full history of
Yeah, and then with the lifecycle stuff, this will be once the templates in the design data folder are in Vault, then you can apply a lifecycle to it to lock it, so people can then have a permission set that maybe only administrators can make changes to those files in Vault. So yeah, that's awesome change. That, loving that. Backups and restores. All right, this is even more of a niche within a niche within a niche within a niche, because even the people who are responsible for using Vault, have got a keen interest in Vault, don't always manage the backup. So this is
the previous options you had for a backup was to take a full copy of the database.
Full backups are a nightmare. So full backups, this is different with server backup. Vault's got its own backup routine, right? So you can create a backup of your company's Vault from within Vault. It's got its own console, which creates a backup package of just Vault. If you're working in a relatively small company, that backup might just take an hour or two to create. But when you've got a Vault that's like 20 plus years old and it's a few terabytes in size, when servers are virtualized, right, they're running on spinning disks that aren't the fastest in the world, these backups can take several days to finish. Like no joke, 3, 4, 5 days just to create a backup set. It's got to write terabytes of data to a spinning disk. And once you get a backup that takes over a day long, you start interfering or crossing paths with, corporate that disaster recovery plans that consume resource on the system and slow the disks down even further. Virus scanners can slow it down even further as well. So full backups, as much as they're useful to have, right, you've got a full backup of the Vault. If anything goes wrong, you've got that backup to then restore from. And restoring them as well, restoring can take just as long. Restoring a few terabytes of data. If you were to copy a 3 terabyte single file from one PC to another, there's a few bottlenecks that can slow it down significantly. But generally, right, once you go over the LAN, right, you've got a 1 gig LAN or 10 gig LAN, right. There's the first bottleneck. You've got the read speed of the disk, and then the write speed of the destination tends to be the biggest bottlenecks that you're going to come up against. Thing is, these backups contain millions and millions of files. You're not necessarily reliant on or bound to the disk read and write speeds. It's the other factors of the disk. The sheer quantity of the data just makes it a huge hugely time-consuming thing to move the data around and then restore it.
This service will cost, which can take up.
All right, so here's the downsides. Takes up time. I mentioned that. Takes a long time to run. Mentioned that. Duplicates the file store. Not sure how that's an issue. It's probably an issue in scenarios where you're not creating a backup for the purposes of disaster recovery. This could be for other purposes. But the fact that it duplicates the file store for the backup is, in most cases, it's the point. You've got a copy of all your files. Still have to copy to an external location. You don't have to, but it's obviously highly recommended. It's pretty pointless backing up the vault and keeping it on the same server. So new option, database-only backups. Takes a full copy of databases. Easy to restore. Takes up low amounts of space. Short time to run. No duplicate file. What? I must admit, I haven't come across an instance where I've only wanted to back up the databases. Don't recall a time for that. I suspect these are because we can and because we probably should give people the option to do this. I'm struggling to come up with maybe because it's 1 o'clock in the morning now, a reason why database only backups are useful. Maybe for testing purposes, troubleshooting purposes. Quite often Autodesk will ask you as part of their troubleshooting steps to send them a backup of your vault minus the file store, so they can restore the databases and just look at where what the vault looks like, the makeup of the vault, that kind of stuff. And then you're not having to send them millions of files alongside it. For internal company use, I don't know when you would do that. Right, so these are the new options here. We've got a few new options in here actually. So we've got backup databases only, backup only the vault databases without any files. So that wouldn't be a valid backup for using as a restore, because if you did that, you had a backup of vault just with the databases. If your server went up in smoke and you lose the file store with that, well then this backup would be absolutely 100% useless because there's no files to restore. Yeah, this here, this looks like you can back up specific vaults rather than like a whole console backup of everything. I do see the value in that, but only really again if you're taking the files along with it. This sounds like it's to help Autodesk troubleshoot. That's kind of where I see this being mostly used.
Which again will save you time on the restore if you're not looking to restore.
Save Autodesk time to restore when they get a vault backup package from a customer with just a vault and just the databases, no files.
So how does this work when restore file store location? So this could be an existing file store on the machine.
When would you do that? When would you back up and then restore, but the file store you're restoring into is different? I mean, maybe if you were hit, well, no, even if you were hit with a ransomware attack and you restored a virtual server to a previous date, your file store will be old, but then so will your databases. You still have a working vault. I can't come up with a scenario where you would want to restore databases into a different file store. Probably good. There will be a point in time where this is probably going to be useful, like a real edge case, but I don't know in sort of daily disaster recovery scenarios when you would do this.
If you were looking to not have a file store for a migration purpose to save time on upgrade, you can also now choose to have no.
For migration purposes, without a file store, I'm not getting it. When would this help with migration to not back up and restore with a file store? I'm not. I mean, that just might be me having brain fog at 1 o'clock in the morning, but don't understand. This is 100. This is very useful. No file store validation though, or maybe that's what he was talking about with the migrations. This takes up so much time. When you do a restore, it validates the file store to make sure the databases and the file stores are actually lined up and there's no mismatches. So it'll validate the file store against what's in the database, and that can take an unreasonable amount of time. So it's good that you can skip that part. You can do a quick file store validation, but to just cancel it completely, because in most cases, if you've got a full backup set with a database and a file store, it's already been validated, and it wouldn't have backed up if it wasn't good in most cases. So that's a good thing.
The databases that need to redirect the file store to point it to the correct location by going to Actions and choosing Redirect.
This is another one where I'm not sure. You've got a vault, you've got a database, you've got a file store. You can now redirect the database to point at a different file store. All I can see there is potential for just disaster, because then the file store, if the file store is in any way different to the original one, well then the pointers in the database will not be pointing to the right thing in the file store. if it's different, I don't know. I'm struggling with that one. Edge cases, possibly. Very, very, very niche edge cases. Good to have the options, though. Really good. Just the flexibility for those edge cases. I'm not complaining. I just can't come up with a routine, typical example of when most people would use that.
The final new feature we're going to look through is the updates to the thin client.
I mean, the thin client, right? So the thin client is Autodesk's web-based access into the Vault, which is normally used by people who aren't CAD users and engineers. They made a huge overhaul to the thin client a couple of years ago, which solved nearly all the problems with it and made it super useful. But I can imagine beyond what was done a couple of years ago, giving people access to change orders, for example, the full change order list. People who don't have CAD licenses couldn't see what was under change, which is a huge problem. You've got purchasing teams looking to quote or asking for quotes on stuff, but they couldn't see whether the thing that we're asking to quote for was under change right now, right?
These updates came out in the point release for the 2023 version.
Oh, not a lot if he's covering what's in 2023. Expand collapse all, that's it.
Allow read-only viewers quick navigation of the environment, and also filter through properties to narrow the search.
Right. I mean, in my experience, which again is just my experience, most, I hate generalizing, it never goes well on the internet, but most people who are given access to the thin client aren't going to go granular with filters and modifying column headers and stacking searches, all that kind of stuff. They're given a website link, which they're told to add to their favorites. They'll click this little button, they'll type in a part number, and they'll just consume what's in front of them. The majority of them don't have the technical know-how to go this deep, but it's always good to have the option.
You can add multiple criteria to the that was added in the 2023.2 version. This will allow a default view to be configured, so the read-only users aren't wasting time configuring them, and admins are able to define the most useful properties for the company. Some smaller features were also added to the thin client, including being able to choose which vault you want to log into if you have multiple, saving time editing the URL. Also, having an update visualization option when selected into a file. This is just to make it clearer, and it will still send it to the job processor when you create the file.
I would like to hope something like that is
Items now also has the option to only show...
You wouldn't want every thin client user having the option of update and visualizations. But what would be useful, don't know if it does this, but a button that'll allow a thin client user to generate a step file rather than it only being on a state change. So a purchasing team need to quote for a product, they need to send it out to a third party. So they'll need to send a step file, but if the thing's currently work in progress and being worked on, or it's in review, for example, and there's no step file yet, a button there to generate a step file would be useful. But there is issues with that, right? It's an uncontrolled step file. It's not being approved. They're issuing something out of the office that's uncontrolled. This is where Vault gets really, really deep into the nitty gritty of needing that kind of granular control, because if not, it's just a free for all. So that's maybe why the Vault team don't do a lot of these things, because there are so many ways in which it can be not necessarily abused, but just it could go wrong. But it's not difficult to come up with those scenarios and sort of cater for them, but you know, it's work.
Items now also has the option to only show released items, data from the thin folders, rather than making this a manual task.
Yeah, okay.
Hearing more detail about.
And that's it for Vault 2024. I mean, to be fair, that's a solid set of changes from the Vault team, which I think on their own, these don't. I'm not looking at this and going, I wish I could upgrade to 2024 instead of 2023. If I'm already on 2023 and it's, you know, there's weeks of regression testing needed to move past it, I don't think this is worthwhile. And couple that with what was Inventor 2024, overall, a site using Inventor and Vault 2023, that there's, in my opinion, not a great amount to justify that migration, unless you just want to be on the latest and greatest at all points. But I don't think the cumulative features in those two products are really worthwhile going through an expense, unless you're a small site and it's just a case of sticking. I say you still use the expression sticking the discs in. You know, we don't do that anymore. But you know, just creating a migration path and going for it in a few hours. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for Symmetry for that. That was a really good video. It was really concise. If you watch it all the way through, I'll link it in the description. They cover, you know, why things are in, why they've came along, and what benefits they have and a quick demonstration of it, albeit so just, you know, in PowerPoint style. But really good video, that one. Much better than the official Vault one. So good job. Right, thanks very much. That'll do it for now. My name's Neil Cross. This has been Tech 3D. That was what's new in Vault 2024. Mostly what's in professional rather than basic, but is what it is. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next one. Doodles.